Evening, everybody. I'm just going to wait for the music. Oh, there we go. Better timing. Right, my question is as follows. What vision would you have for the JCR community next year if you were to be elected as senior student?
Alright, hello guys. First off, thank you so much all for coming. This is an intimidatingly large crowd, so I'll do my best. But also thanks so much for everyone who I managed to reach whilst canvassing. I learned so much over this week, whether it be about people's views on exec elections or just more nitty-gritty things like the role of societies in college. It's been a huge experience and I have you to thank for that, so thanks so much. With regards to the actual question, I would say my vision for the JCR next year is threefold. I would like a community that is more valued, a community that is more integrated, and a community that is more effective. So what do I mean by this? Firstly, with regards to a community that is more valued, lots of people that I've talked to have seen, for example, certain societies not being able to get their views across to certain people they want to get their views across to as effectively as possible. And this is something I really, really want to address as a senior student. I want everyone to feel that they can get their voices across as effectively as possible so they feel they're contributing to college life. Also, with regards to being more valued, I think it's transparency that's very important here as well. Publishing what is going on behind the scenes so that people can actually see that what they want being done is being done. So valued is the first thing. Second thing, I like a more integrated community. This is firstly more integrated between the JCR and the exec. For those of you who've read my manifesto, you would have heard this before. For those who haven't, please give it a look if you get some time. I'd like to break down a lot of the barriers between the JCR and the exec through anonymous messaging services, informal drop-in sessions, greater JCR presence and exec presence throughout college, just so that people feel that they can really approach the JCR, members of the JCR exec, and they feel that they're an active part of college life. And also with regards to integration, groups that might feel slightly more relegated in college, like international students, certain societies, certain groups, that everyone feels that they are playing an active role. So that's the second thing. The last thing is I like a community that's a lot more effective. So I like a more effective exec that's a lot clearer in the direction that it's taking and feels it can work together cohesively to make sure that everyone gets what they want to the biggest degree. And also an exec and a JCR that can work together cohesively to represent their views both on the level of college office and the level of the wider university. Ultimately, this will create a vision of the JCR community that can work together well, that is trustworthy, that is effective, that is welcoming and warm. This is what Castle should be, this is why I came here, this is why I'm running for the role. So, yeah, thanks.
Hello everybody, my name is Fraser. First of all, as is customary, thank you all so much for putting up with me during the canvassing. I had some really useful conversations and it was really sort of gratifying to see that all of you genuinely do care. Because I think that, you know, it's often thought that particularly freshers aren't that engaged because they haven't been here for that long, but I think really you all are very sort of switched on, which is really positive, and regardless of which one of us wins, I think the JCR is going to be in a very strong position for that. So thank you. In regard to the question, my vision for the JCR community, obviously I have quite a lot of policies, and as a senior student you have a lot of responsibilities that sort of relate to this. The main thing I want to do though is make sure that the JCR exists and is sort of aware of its position in a wider context. I think that the JCR within college and within the university can feel quite sort of isolated, when in fact within Castle as a whole there's the MCR, the SCR, college office and the staff, the sort of porters, the catering team, the housekeeping staff, that sort of, you know, branch. I think it would be really useful for us to remember that, particularly in terms of sort of Castle spirit, which is something that I'm really keen on, but I don't want that to become synonymous with JCR spirit, important though that is. I think that we're a lot stronger as a united front in sort of whole college level. The second thing is on a more sort of wider sense. Obviously the JCR exists within sort of, or under-ish, the DSU, and is subject to a lot of university policies. I think that it's important that we remember that whilst that is true, we can benefit from the DSU and we can benefit from the university. And if we're aware of their sort of position, we can use them to sort of better ourselves. Because ultimately I think that we are a lot stronger as part of a larger system. because I know it often feels like the university imposed things. It often feels like the DSU is a bit pointless. But ultimately, the DSU is the official voice of students, and the university the university council in particular is the group that decides on how we operate and what we can do. So I think it's really important that the JCR community becomes more aware of that through more information being provided to you, so that you can sort of form opinions, so that you can raise your concerns, and so that you can find ways to engage with those systems for your own benefit and for the benefit of the whole JCR.
Hi guys, what these guys said, thanks so much for coming down, and like, it's summative season. I know you're all busy, but it's we really appreciate all of you coming here to sort of listen to us drone on again. For those of you I spoke to during canvassing period, what my manifesto really focused on was trying to actually increase community cohesion with college as a whole, and that sort of looks at building the relationships, not just between the JCR, where there are some relationships which do need to be addressed, but actually looking at our relationship as a wider college community, like Fraser said. And so my overall vision for the year is to sort of increase this cohesion through predominantly communication, and actually encourage a greater sense of involvement for the members of the JCR, which may have been lacking in the past year. So that's my general aim. How do we go about doing that? I think one of the main things is actually how we communicate within the JCR itself. And from speaking to a lot of you, going around canvassing, what a lot of you have said is that you don't really understand what's going on within college. You don't know what the exec do day to day, and this is something you're interested in. And I think one of the key things which has been highlighted in the VSS and the services manager roles is that we don't have a functioning website at the moment which is concise, informative or effective in getting across what is actually happening in this community here. And I think that's something which is really key. Having actual links to welfare pages, having clear, so you just go onto welfare, you see there's stress related things, there's stuff to do with eating disorders, it's all clear and it's all there. Having summaries of what's going on in the meetings around college and the meetings on a wider university scale, because I mean the results that we've got back from Will's poll lately about accommodation fees, the return we've got on in terms of response from you as a JCR is absolutely incredible. I've had a look at the comments which people have been putting, and there are pages and pages of response, and that really highlights how important the wider university issue is. But people do not know what's going on in the President's Committee, and there's four main things there: the alcohol policy, looking at minorities reports, looking at value for services, and the long-term direction which the President's Committee is taking, the wider university scale of things. But people do not know about this. In terms of sort of JCR and exec relationships, a lot of people have said to me that, yeah, I know who they are, I know who Will is, I know who Tom is, but I still don't feel that they're approachable enough. And what I want to focus on is actually having, not just saying, oh, we are approachable, we are friendly, you can come to us with all your issues, but actually saying, we are available, and you can, by making ourselves available, we are more approachable. And doing that through exec drop-ins, maybe once a week having certain members of the exec, doing such things like a welfare drop-in, where people can come and actually chat to you and have that informal conversation, ask informal questions which they may not feel they can get across in JCR meetings, which are generally so big. And so that's just one way of getting sort of a greater integration of the exec within college life. I think also having welcome drinks at the start of the year with the exec and just saying, look, this is us on an informal level. We are students too. You can come and connect with us in this, and this is a way of breaking down those barriers. So having that initially. I also think that in terms of the community we have here at Castle,
can you conclude quickly?
Yeah, we've got such a strong MCR here, which has grown so quickly over the last couple of years, and we don't take full advantage of that. We need to reach out to them more and give them an idea about what we have to offer them and what they can offer us in terms of the junior mentoring scheme, which has sort of come to light recently.
Right, we're happy to open the floor. Questions to the floor, Henry.
A slightly niche question, but a broad one nonetheless. As a JCR, as you know, we are a DSO. But next year is our tri-yearly vote on whether we remain a DSO or not. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are on that and why.
Given that next year is the opportunity to vote on whether we remain a DSO or not, what is your personal opinion on that topic?
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, a DSO is a Durham student organisation. Most JCRs function as a DSO. I believe Team Durham does as well. It's just a sort of way that we exist within the university. Personally, I think it's a very good idea. I think the other option is largely becoming an independent charity. Grey do that. I don't know if any other colleges do. Ultimately, being a DSO means that we have the support of the university, particularly in sort of financial terms, not in the sense that they give us money, but they help us run things and they help us with any sort of financial difficulties that we have. There's also the fact that if we weren't a DSO, I think we'd struggle to maintain the sort of non-sabbatical officer system that we currently have. The impression I've had from other presidents is that, or well, you know, college presidents where you have senior student, but my potential future equivalent. Yeah, the impression I've had is that the difficulty with having current students running a sort of non-DSO JCR is that there is basically a lot more work. Grey have had to hire a sort of independent treasurer person who is full-time to deal with their finances. They also have to pay an independent accountant to do their sort of yearly sort of budgeting accounts thing. One, it's more work, two, it's more expensive, and ultimately I just don't really see the need. There is that sort of ideological sense of more sovereignty if we're independent, but ultimately the benefits of being a DSO, the support that the university can provide us, are much, much greater than any sort of, you know, independence and you know, hoorah, castle, JCR. You know, the support ultimately in practical terms is more important than any sort of ideological benefit.
Yeah, I mean, what Fraser says about the sort of financial benefits of remaining a DSO, absolutely. The support which the university gives us is fantastic, but also actually turning it around and saying to the university, these are the changes we want, and these are the things which we think are important for us as a community. Moving away from the DSO sort of status means that potentially we have less chance to impose what we want as a JCR and the values which are important to us. And I think looking at sort of the past couple of years and the things which have been important, such as currently accommodation, in the past couple of years, or in the past year, river safety, and actually being part of the wider university thing and having that pressure on the university to do something about the issues which we find important is really important. And you can see that from the results we've got lighting up Windy Gap, we've got increased fencing all around the peninsular area. These are sort of issues which, being part of that wider university spectrum, is actually really important. And if we lose that, I feel that we kind of lose our voice in the grand scheme of things, and the university have a lot more power in terms of dictating what they want from us and actually the direction that we're going to go. And I think we need to maintain that autonomy, not just in the JCR, but as a whole college, and I hope that as our castle, that we want to have a say in how the university is run. I think the DSO is a prime way of actually doing that. But also, it's all about conforming to what... I suppose the DSO is about them imposing their infrastructure on us as well, and we need to have that two-way conversation so we can also contribute to that and say where we think their infrastructure is going wrong.
Right, so the first part of my answer would very much echo what Fraser and Gus have already said. They've raised very good points. Financial benefits, excellent, very positive reason to stay in DSO. Also, slightly rephrasing what's been said, it just shows that we're playing the game, really. It shows that we are interested and committed to involving ourselves in university-wide organisations that can be participated in to affect change. And showing that we have this commitment by remaining in the DSO, I think is a fundamental part of actually showing that we are willing to play their game, so they should listen to our views a lot more. In terms of what new I can add to the answers already given, I would point out the fact that the DSO is probably one of the organisations where the student union probably have less of a prevalence. Having spoken to a lot of JCR presidents from other colleges, some have varied opinions on the role of the union as a middleman between Prescom and the Vice-Chancellor and the wider university in terms of actually getting our views across and affecting change. DSO is one of those places where the student union have less of an influence in terms of their actual physical presence there. So A, that means we have another avenue of communication amongst other presidents and amongst representatives of the university, and B, it acts as another way of attacking these issues without having to use the DSU as an intermediary. So I think having these various avenues of communication are fundamentally important to the way the university works and our contributions to it. So to sum up there, yes, I think remaining in the DSO would be a very good move on our part.
In your opinion, the exec positions in order of importance?
Please list in the order of importance the current executive officers. Executive roles.
Well, if there's one way to make relations already taught between whoever gets it in next year's exec, this is the prime way of doing it. Oh wow. I'm going to be completely selfish here, and I think in terms of holding the exec itself to account and making sure that everyone's doing their job, the senior student has a very important overall role in actually maintaining that people are doing what they've been elected for and that the direction is going the right way. Again, I mean, it's totally boring, but I mean, seconding that, I think the vice senior student actually holds it all together, and really they're the backbone behind the sort of front face of the college. And so that's not just trying to flirt with you, Chris, though. After that, wow. I think in terms of how many people get involved with it, welfare is then a very, very important position, and it's it's something which a lot of the college engages with, and yeah, absolutely important. It provides really a vital lifeline for a lot of students in terms of when they get stressed, when they have issues, that sort of thing. We obviously wouldn't be functioning without Joe currently. We'd be in a nightmare, we wouldn't know where our money was. He is going to be up there, I think, after that. Campaigns, I mean, outreach like you guys, sort of getting things across. I mean, big heckler here. No, I'm getting to this. No, of course, summer's work can't be ignored. The amount of time and effort she puts into doing stuff around college, I mean, that's obviously important. But actually, I think I wouldn't like to further divide the exec after that. I feel that you can't compare the different work they do and the different directions they take. So I mean, it would be rude to try and actually divide them further. I think actually for me personally, if I were to get this role, I mean, I wouldn't like to cause any further issues. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Oh, God. I suppose there's two ways of approaching this, really. It'd be very easy to say the roles that haven't actually been selected yet are probably the least vital just because there isn't a person who fills them yet. Okay, so if I were to actually rank it, first of all, yeah, I think it's very difficult to argue with the fact that the senior student is probably the most fundamental role of the exec in terms of the stuff they have to do both on behalf of the JCR and behind the scenes and with the university and with college office. The amount of responsibility they have, the amount of work that they have to do just can't be beat, really. Vice senior student would be second. They are the main support network for the senior student in ensuring that the very niche problems of college life are always resolved. And ultimately they're probably the second person that most people come to on the exec if they actually want to address an issue. Really sorry, Archie, I'm going to put treasurer third. Simply because the occasional liaising of the treasurer with the senior student and vice senior student, their importance in managing college accounts. I think a lot of people don't appreciate how much the college would come tumbling down if we had a bad financial standing. And we have the current treasurer, Joe, to thank for that. He's done a cracking job, and I think people really need to take that into account. I would then put welfare. Welfare is, again, a fundamental part of college. Loads of people really appreciate the work that welfare do here. It makes the college experience professional but also enjoyable. After that, I would then put USO. Sorry, I really don't want to offend anyone. I put USO simply because they are the other voice other than senior student that actually makes sure that your voice gets heard on the university level, which a lot of people sometimes don't appreciate, and that is a very, very, very important role in making sure that our views get across to the Vice Chancellor at the wider university level. In terms of people who are left, let's see, the services, campaigns. I put them all, again, I'm going to have to put them all more or less, and social chair as well. Simply because it hasn't been selected yet, I've been trying to base it off of people who've already been elected. I think they all contribute something different. I'm not going to take the hard line, they're all the same. They are very much different, but they all bring a new flavour to college life. Social chair being very, being very important for making sure that we have a great time at college. Services that college continues to run smoothly in terms of the facilities that we have.
Can you wrap up?
Absolutely. And campaigns, working with welfare and making sure that the main issues are pressed. So that is how we bring the exec.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that everyone on the exec does do a different job, and so it is quite difficult to quantify their importance. I don't want to cop out though, so I'll group them in sort of bands of importance. That might be the best way to do it. I think senior student, vice senior student and treasurer are probably at the top because they deal with the external stuff, the internal stuff and all the money. They do, that's what they do. After that we've probably got, no one's mentioned bar yet. I think the bar is quite important probably. What is it next? Undercroft chair. Yeah, I'm a people pleaser. Yes. So yes, we have bar, we have social, we have welfare, campaigns, services, US. No, this is a cop out actually, isn't it? and development, of course, which everyone agrees is very important. We do agree. No, I think ultimately the issue that they're trying to address here in this question, I think, is whether every member of the exec should be on the exec, and ultimately I don't think that's the place of senior student to decide. So if this question were to be taken more seriously, perhaps I would actually have to ask all of you what you think, and that would be a better way to answer it. So there you go.
Before we take another question from the floor, we're going to take a quick question from email. If, as you've all decided, that senior student is the most important role in college, how much are you running for your ego?
Okay. I mean, absolutely, I need to put it out there, I'm not running for my ego. This is genuinely something I've always wanted to do. For those of you who know me closely, I actually went to the senior student drop-in sessions last year with Throp in front of a window, which in hindsight was a bad idea. But it's something that I've always wanted to do in college. So firstly, it's not an ego thing, it's because it's something I'm genuinely keen to do. Secondly, I think ego can be taken out of the equation because there are genuine things I want to achieve with regards to this role, and that's the reason I'm running for it, because I think it's the best way to affect the changes in college, to achieve the vision I've already outlined to you guys. This is the best way to do it. The third thing I would highlight is that being senior student it's a lot about personality and charisma, not necessarily ego, but I think in terms of being able to get your views across and being able to show that you are committed to this role and that you are enthusiastic towards it, but you're going to take it professionally, is something that really needs to come across from any candidate. And while some people might confuse charisma with ego, ultimately I think it's more a case of showing how driven you are to actually do it, and that's something that I hope comes across when I'm speaking. I hope it doesn't come across any other way. So to summarise that, absolutely I'm not running for my ego. I'm doing this because I want to make a change and I want to do what's best for this college and what's best for the JCR.
I think it's important to remember that you do need a just a teensy bit of an ego to do the job. I think being de facto leader of the exec, being the sort of face of Castle, you do need something of an ego. Obviously that isn't the reason that you should do it though, and that's not the reason that I'm doing it. Ultimately, the reason that I'm going for senior student, and the reason that anyone should go for any exec position, is that they want to affect a positive change in the JCR. Because that's what the exec is really for, and in particular, that's what senior student has the capacity to do. And also, I suppose senior student is also there to prevent negative changes. Because I think we're going to face quite a lot of turbulence in the next few years. The Vice-Chancellor has now been in place for a year, and so his new policies are going to be implemented, I imagine, in the next year or two. Or at least that process will start. We've got various other high-ranking university officials leaving at the end of this year, and so obviously we're going to have a bit of new blood at the top. And also there's the fact that the DSU continues to be, you know, not particularly engaged with, which means that as a sort of student body across the university, we're not in a particularly strong place to deal with any of it at that level, perhaps. So senior student in that sense is a sort of mitigating sort of entity, and that's another important thing that I think sometimes gets forgotten. It's not just about affecting positive change, it's also about preventing negative change. And ultimately that's the reason I want to be senior student, is because the JCR is marvellous but could be better, and needs to stay as brilliant as it currently is.
Well, I'm going to fundamentally disagree with Fraser there, and say that I've just always wanted to live in the castle and be king of the castle, effectively. No, not at all. I think fundamentally the role of the exec are servants of college, and I think you have to look at how much time and effort goes into the roles of the exec too. And these are not roles which you can take lightly and take just because you'd like to sort of promote your own image. They are roles which actually require a lot of commitment and a great deal of thought and sort of composure when trying to speak publicly like this and actually get a job done. It's not, while you may boost your ego through actually affecting positive change, as Fraser said, I don't think that's the primary thing. And what I would love to see sort of continued is actually breaking down this sort of image that the exec are going for an ego boost, effectively. The fact is that they are servants, and the changes which happen within the college and the day-to-day running of the college is down to them. And I don't think that's, like, you can sort of equate an ego thing in that, as Fraser said. You've got to be able to sort of fulfill a slight ego characteristic in terms of actually trying to get points across and actually saying where people disagree with you and where you really feel something is strongly that you feel strongly that you want to get something done. At that point you have to try and go, yeah, well, I've got this ego and I think this is why we should push this through, and I've got a certain view which I want to get through. But I think, yeah, no, it's about being a servant and it's about actually representing the views of the JCR, and I think that doesn't really equate to being an ego characteristic.
Understanding of how Castle Community Action fits into the JCR structure and how you as senior student will support it next year.
Can you explain how CCA fits within the JCR structure and how as a senior student you would support it in the coming year?
So CCA is currently, to my knowledge, a committee within college. I think that perhaps that is not ideal. Personally, I think that CCA is not given enough of a place in college governance, and it should have more. I realise, of course, Kat, you are very involved. I'm not trying to sort of buy favour. Because, of course, that's not allowed, according to the standing orders. So, no, I think ultimately CCA is not quite undervalued. I think the fact that it's very young, it's only in its second full year, does somewhat limit it, or at least people think that limits it. The CCA president, though, is doing an awful lot to represent both Castle and the university more widely on a sort of external level. So the CCA president, Danielle, is currently on she is the point of contact for the World Heritage Site manager. She talks to the Palace Green Library, the Cathedral, and she sits on committees that no other university representative sits on. I think that it's very unfortunate that CCA is only a committee within college when the CCA president externally is a lot more than that. I think it would be very beneficial, one, for us to have sort of outreach at our sort of central to our governance and central to what we do just on an ideological basis, but also I think that the fact that the CCA president is seen by lots of other people outside of college suggests that we should probably have her as a representative, well, him or her, as a representative of the JCR more generally through perhaps being on the exec. I realise that people may wish to argue with that, and obviously I would open that up to discussion, but ultimately I think that it is something that we should talk about as a JCR, because the CCA president does a lot more than we're currently aware of, and the arguments are incredibly persuasive for them being more than just a committee. I hope that satisfies your question in some way.
I mean, Fraser seems to have actually covered pretty much everything there, unfortunately. I think what he said about the committee, what makes CCA an anomaly now is the fact that since the bar restructure, CCA, I think, remains the only sort of major committee within the castle which doesn't have. Ends committee. Sorry, I stand corrected.
Carry on.
As I understand it, they're the only sort of major committee which doesn't have a proper executive member on the executive committee. And why does that make things difficult? At the moment, CCA is only accountable to the JCR through will, and there are certain issues which arise with sort of not being less accountable. The fact that if something goes majorly wrong, then basically bringing CCA into Castle and bringing it under sort of more of our regulations and more of our procedures actually saves us for a lot of hassle if something does go wrong. And if something happens, which it's not likely to, we hope, in terms of someone feels they've been mistreated on the hands of CCA, and actually having them inside the college and actually having the procedures which govern them through the standing orders is very important. I think, yeah, as Fraser said, I've been asked by lots of people, what do you think of an exec restructure in terms of bringing CCA onto the exec? And personally, I do not feel that a member of CCA itself, as the head of CCA itself, should be an executive position. I think that places too much emphasis on one particular, it's not a charity, it's an outreach organisation, but one group of outreach. I think if we were to sort of develop a role which incorporated CCA, that would be more of a charities and outreach coordinator for the castle, and sort of making that clear that there are other charities we can support and there are other groups that we can support. So I think, again, as Fraser said, it's something which needs to be developed, and actually ask the JCR, what do you think the importance of CCA is to your castle, and do you think it deserves representation on the exec?
It's very difficult with knowledge-specific questions when the first two candidates have covered most of the bases, but I'll try and flesh out what's been said in more nuanced ways and do my best. Okay, so firstly, I agree with a lot of the stuff that's already been said. CCA is currently a committee, and there's a lot of people that believe that the president of CCA belongs on the exec because they work hours and have responsibilities that are fairly similar to current exec hours and responsibilities. And other colleges at the moment, their outreach programs tend to have representatives that are also in the college exec. So by doing this, we would be mirroring other colleges with a system that actually works for many people. So I'm definitely not averse to the idea. And certainly what's already been discussed, as has been said, Danielle is the main mediator between UNESCO and other sites with the castle. This is a nice brand of communication that works kind of outside the college office between the exec and other groups. So it's another avenue of communication I think can be reinforced by giving the CCA president a more high-ranking role in college by making them part of the exec. Another thing that's been mentioned is that Danielle communicates directly through Will. Having spoken to a lot of people about this issue of CCA and whether they should be more integrated, it's been brought to my knowledge that sometimes people believe that because of this one-on-one relationship, things are being done a little bit too behind the scenes, and sometimes decisions are being taken that they don't feel are representative of the entire exec. Thereby putting the CCA president on the exec would feel that they are more represented because they're part of this team. So again, from that perspective, it's a good idea. However, I would take a slightly more trepid approach than some of the opinions that have already been voiced. So what's important to remember is CCA, whilst it has been growing from strength to strength over the past few years, is still a comparatively new committee. It was established under Simon Gallows a few years ago, and whilst, as I said, it's been growing, it is still comparatively new. And when discussing any options towards an exec reshuffle or incorporating new people into the exec, I think fundamentally the most important thing is knowledge and data gathering. So in terms of whether it should be tackled this year, I don't think so. Because I don't think we have the knowledge and resources to really be able to say, okay, do they actually belong in the exec? However, gathering this knowledge and getting the ball rolling is something that I would consider doing.
Chris.
What is the exec's role in disciplining the JCR?
What is the exec's role in disciplining the JCR, including the executive committee?
Okay, so for those who have read my manifesto, one of my points is developing a multi-stage disciplinary complaints process. I felt need to clarify what I meant by that in actually talking to people and in canvassing and taking their views on. I completely regret writing disciplinary in there. And what I meant by this, developing this multi-stage complaints system, effectively, is looking at to sort of how we deal with stuff that just happened recently, like the bar, like what the incident with Vice Bar Chair, and how we went about that. And my feeling is that as a JCR, we should leave the actual discipline of our members to college office and have that. However, we should be able to say, we do not agree with your actions, and we do not agree that what you have done comes within our values. And I feel that having a multi-stage process by which, if someone complains about the actions of a member, be it JCR exec, the exec can turn around and on behalf of the JCR say, look, this is not what we believe to be right, we do not believe that you've gone about this in the right way, and we think you should sort of think about your actions. Take that step up. We already have sconces within these standing orders. It's 18.3, I believe, on these sconces. Do correct me if I'm wrong there.
I think it's 0.5, but I'll just check.
Have a check. And there is already that there, but we never use that. And in some ways I think that's right. To what extent should the senior student and vice senior student be able to just levy fines for disciplinary actions? I mean, it's up to debate. It's a very controversial issue. It's something that needs to be looked at. If you look at the standing orders there is a motion about censure. And the idea of that is that for someone who's not a committee member, an exec member, but is on a committee, you can challenge them and you can basically officially reprimand them for their actions. And while this isn't a vote of no confidence, it doesn't challenge them in that sense, it brings out into light and it makes transparent what the issues are. And I think one of the key issues we had around the vote of no confidence was the fact that it suddenly came, for us as a JCI, it went from 0 to 60 in about 2 days, and it was suddenly just right in front of us. And it meant that suddenly two very opposing sides were just clashing in the next JCR meeting, which wasn't the most productive way of dealing with it. And actually looking at the effect that has had on Barnaby in terms of what's happened after that with college office, I don't think that's the most productive or efficient way that we could have gone about things. Therefore, having sort of stages before the vote of no confidence which say that we don't agree with your actions, maybe check yourself. Just slowing it all down so people have the chance to see what's going on, and it doesn't seem like college officers jumped out of nowhere, but actually the JCR is taking a more active role in saying, no, we do not agree with this, however much we will then support you in terms of disciplinary with college office.
Alright, there's quite a lot to talk about here, so I'll try and break it down. Firstly, what is the current system of the exec's involvement in the disciplinary process? It's already been mentioned that they are very much involved in sconcing, particularly will, and that's for obviously minor offences. There is also a thing in standing orders, I believe, that will is allowed to sit in on discussions about more serious offences. So there is definitely a voice there. Does this system radically need changing in order to involve the exec and JCR in the disciplinary process more? Physically, no. Intellectually, yes. So that sounds a bit up in the air. I'll try and explain myself. So basically, I think the current system structurally, as it is, works. So you have College Office as this third body that can offer an outsider's perspective on serious offences as they are committed. A lot of people are very wary about having students punishing other students, and this is not something that should be pushed too far, because regardless of who you are, there will be an emotional impact, however big, on the actual punishment you administer. It's also necessary to take into account that College Office has access to confidential records that the members of the exec do not, and so can make more informed decisions with regards to actually the welfare of the people involved as well. I think the system as it exists is fine with regards to that. I think fundamentally the problem is communication. Communication with discipline is something that can fall out of favour, so especially with the events in college as described by Gus. Part of the problem here was a fundamental breakdown of communication between College Office, between the JCR and between the exec. Also, when it's been said that things jumped out of nowhere, again I think that's a problem of communication. Several warnings were issued, offences committed beforehand. Whilst it may seem like an extreme measure, this was not something that I would characterise as simply jumping out of nowhere. It is something that developed very much behind the scenes, but again, if people were more aware of what was going on behind the scenes through such communication, this is something they would feel they have more of a handle on and can actually offer their opinions on a lot more. Yeah, I'd say, so basically I think the JCL should be able to offer their views more and be more informed on what's going on with discipline, but ultimately the current system works. And if I were to make one alteration, maybe it's been suggested to be having the exec have slightly more control over community service punishments rather than much, much higher offences. I think that's something to consider. But ultimately, we shouldn't take too much of a stab at a system that I do believe is functional.
I don't quite fundamentally disagree. I do a bit though. I think ultimately, certainly the exec having power over sconcing is useful. I think that the JCR having a role, because obviously the currently senior student is able to go into, they can either request to or be invited to go into formal disciplinaries. I understand why the senior student is the person who is supposed to do that. Ultimately, I don't think it's ideal though. Because the senior student is supposed to represent the opinions of the JCR and is also supposed to have opinions themselves. Ultimately, I do not believe that the JCR should be a disciplinary body in any unnecessary way, which is why I think that the chairman, and this is on my manifesto fortunately, should be the person to go into those meetings with College Office, because the chairman can remain impartial, or at least should remain impartial, and so should be able to sort of act in totally pragmatic terms. So for instance, if they're sort of threatening to suspend half of the bar staff, not sure why I chose bar, toasty bar. Let's imagine that they're going to suspend half of the toasty bar. The chairman would be in a position to say, well no, that's really going to hinder the JCR and it's going to make our functioning quite difficult, so let's stagger those suspensions so that we can still sort of function fairly well. Whereas if the senior student is there, he will be bringing, or well, he in our case, but they will be bringing the opinions of the JCR, their own opinions, and that means that one, the exec will be slightly less approachable, I think, because people will be more aware of the sort of disciplinary capacity of the senior student. And also I think that just generally the JCR shouldn't have that kind of power, and particularly the exec shouldn't be in that position. Was that not? Oh, crikey. And so that I think is the main problem. Other than that, yes, it does work fairly well. Communication has been the real issue this year, because we've had sort of JCR disciplinary stuff and College Office disciplinary stuff going on at once. And because one thing happened first, it looks like they were sort of linked, when in fact they're actually a bit more separate than it seemed. So I think that having more information coming from the exec about what's being discussed would be really useful in terms of ensuring that everyone understands how disciplinary procedure is working on each individual case. Obviously be wary of confidentiality, but communication would be useful.
We're going to go to another email question. Let me just find it. The question is, how do you feel about the, quote, decline of college traditions in recent years, and what would your approach be to college traditions in the future?
It's a very interesting question. Before I answer, could I pull a Chris and ask for a bit more water, please? Sorry, thank you. What do I think about the decline in college traditions? Well, oh God, sorry, Rob. I firmly believe that Castle is a very unique community with regards to some of the traditions that it has. Thank you very much. Fundamentally, it's important to maintain these traditions because it's what makes us who we are as a college, and it's one of the main reasons why a lot of people specifically want to come to this one, because it's very, very rooted in tradition. And that cultivates in turn a sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of identity that's really, really important here. With regards to the actual decline, I assume what's being discussed here is the limitations placed on certain traditions such as Lumley Run, or perhaps, I wouldn't really class Panto that much as a tradition, but certainly something that happens every year. And other things like that, where people feel that too many regulations and too many limitations are being placed around these. My response would be, it's important to consider why such an approach is being taken and why such limitations are being put in place. Ultimately, we are defined, as I say, by our traditions, and it's important to have fun, and it's important to show that we have this collective sense of identity. But if parts of these traditions are potentially harmful to others, if they potentially get us in trouble with the police, as might have happened in the past, or they create a poor image of the JCR or a poor image of Castle that might lead to others speculating whether we are a responsible and sensible community, then obviously difficulties arise. And we need to take into account how we get over this image if we want to actually make sure that these traditions are maintained. And one of these ways is through little pragmatic things, is making sure that we give the impression that we can have fun, but we ultimately are a community that knows what each other wants and knows what's best for ourselves and the wider Castle community and the university as a whole. And this would be important, making sure that such traditions are maintained, which is very important in making sure that our experience is exactly what we want it to be.
Yeah, I think Tom did quite well there. Not in like a patronising way. Certainly I think Lumley, Panto, and possibly, it hasn't happened yet, but the new alcohol policy is going to affect June Ball quite a lot, I imagine, given that ticketed events can only have 3 units attached to the tickets. And those traditions are important, I think, and they do form part of our identity as a college. Ultimately, though, we do have to wonder why they're being infringed upon. And ultimately, I think that the main reason is that the powers that be have decided that either they harm us or that they harm the university in some way. And if either of those things are the case, then I think it's important that we do take that on, and if we don't sort of, I don't think there's any point in, and it wouldn't be wise to sort of have a blanket ban on any of these things. I think though that it would be important to rework them to ensure that any issues are dealt with. It is difficult because it's hard to imagine how Lumley will operate differently, given that the point is sort of getting very drunk and having that sort of lengthy run. It's as a thing. You may have guessed, I'm not a sportsman. I don't really know, but I think it would be difficult to imagine most of these traditions in any other way, which does pose problems, but if they are causing any sort of difficulties, then we do have to deal with that. And even if that does harm our sense of tradition or our sort of identity, ultimately I think that there are more important things at play. And if these traditions are putting any of our students at risk, or if they're putting any of the public at risk, or if they're putting the university and the university's reputation, and obviously that shouldn't be our main purpose as a JCR, to sort of keep the university looking fine and dandy, but it is important that we factor that in, and if these traditions are being harmful in some way, then we can't continue with them, I don't think, and it's important that we are sort of thoughtful in how we go about continuing them.
So, one of the key sort of criticisms we as a college get is that we are an exclusive and we are a very traditional college itself. What these guys are focused on in terms of Lumley, in terms of the impact on June Ball, I think, again, you've got to put it in the wider context of the university is implementing a new alcohol policy, which, whether or not you agree with it, it's going to be there, and we have to adapt to those things. However, I think you can actually turn this around and say, while tradition is great, how can we move things forward and how can we make things actually progressive? So take Lumley for instance. The reason the police fined people on Lumley was because they were throwing up on the streets. And there is an issue around that, that's a public nuisance. And actually when you look at the wider effect of that, you've got to take that as it is. You are throwing up on the streets and you need to do something about that. So actually taming that tradition and bringing it in line in a way that we can still do it, but more people are happy, why is that a bad thing? That is a tradition which we still have, but it's been tamed in order to fit the modern day, effectively. Move on to June Ball. I think what you have to take into account with the alcohol policy is, yes, the university have implemented this policy and no, it's not the best thing. Rather than turning around saying, oh, we completely oppose this, it's trying to actually distill some common sense in the process. One of the issues which people have raised is that by actually by taking away the alcohol included in the ticket, are you going to encourage people to actually go back to their rooms and drink more, where you don't know how much they've drunk? And I think that's when you have to start challenging this sort of breakdown, because I think June Ball is not fundamentally an issue of people going out and wanting to get absolutely shit-faced. It's not about that. People want to have a really good night and enjoy it, and in this way, like the tradition has been sort of ruined slightly, and that's something we've got to work on. I think I'd like to mention the bar as well quickly, in the fact that the new system is not the best system. It's fairer. Undoubtedly the old system had to change. People were being intimidated, the sexual aspect of the interview process was not something which we could continue, and so that being changed, it's turned into a PR questionnaire, effectively. And I don't think that's right, and I think we should actually work to get some more autonomy and bring back the tradition of the interview system, which we control, we have a say over, and relates the actual question. Yeah, relates it all to our college, and try and maintain some tradition. So yeah, I think in some ways tradition needs to be progressive, but in other ways I think we need to stand up for it, especially in the bar and June Ball, that's why we should stand up for it.
If you could be a person from history, who would you be and why?
Thank you, chap in the coat with the fur, for that. Who would I be and why? There's that sort of desire to be very sort of, moral and remembered well, and then there's also that desire to have epic feasts and lots of orgies. All credibility gone. I really can't go with the feasts and orgies now, can I? I'd quite like to be Churchill. You know, not for the cigars as much. He was very good at sort of quips, and he was a good. I think we can all agree Churchill was quite a good prime minister. He dealt with the issues at hand. You know the ones. And so yes, I think I'd go with Churchill.
Right, so I'm going to go in the opposite direction here. For my housemates, they'll back me up here. I've got a constant struggle with food and body image. That when you're sat in a rubber by the pool on holiday and people start taking photos of you, it really becomes an issue because the rolls don't help. And so if I could be anyone in history, I think it would have to go down the sort of Gerard Butler in 300, Leonidas look, the sort of six-pack absolutely ripping out, and actually that's something I'm working at home. I've cut down on carbs, which I think that's really something I'm working towards, and if I could be someone, yeah, it would be like him, because I mean he's got a badass kick. Right. And for those of you who've seen 300, it's well worth the watch, or for those of you who haven't seen 300, it's well worth the watch. But I think you'll all know where I'm coming from when you have watched it.
It's annoying because as a historian I should theoretically have thousands of examples jump to mind. I suppose if I had to go for any figure in history, I would go for Attila the Hun. Which is a slightly rogue choice, I understand, but I'm going to try and back it up. Firstly, Attila the Hun was a very, very competent leader in what he did. He was loved by his followers, completely adored, they were completely loyal, and he got stuff done, which might relate to the role, perhaps. The second thing I'd say is, I think the statistic is 1 in 60 people are supposed to be descended from Attila the Hun to an extent. Is that Genghis Khan? Oh, okay, never mind. Well, Attila the Hun, when he was going around, certainly had a good time in what he was doing. I'm not really going to explore much more what that means, although I think Fraser's mention of orgies might shed some light on that. Thirdly, he died of a nosebleed, which is potentially interesting, but it made him very memorable, and for some reason that's something that I see myself as being remembered for, ultimately leading a very famous life but dying slightly pointlessly and hilariously. So I would compare myself to him.
Dom?
If you were a type of college potato,
If you were a college potato, what potato would you be and why?
I think I'm just going to have to go with a potato which kind of represents me and my personality most, and that is the curly fry. I think when I had my full head of hair, before I had the unfortunate incident with a Turkish barber in Durham, that is what really most represents me, and yeah, like look at the curly fries next time, there's a massive resemblance.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with curly fries as well, but for several different reasons. Well, I mean, ultimately, I've got to be honest, and I would compare myself to curly fries most closely. Firstly, they're very aesthetically pleasing, and I like to think you've got to back yourself when you're up here. Secondly, they're very sharp. I like to think I'm quite sharp in good scenarios. People tend to enjoy their presence and they tend to light up a room when they're there. I like to think at the best of times I can similarly light up a room and brighten up people's day. It certainly does the same for me. And it's something that I'd like to see a lot more around college. And ultimately one of my policies is that certain members of the exec should have a greater collegiate presence. So I think it relates to a lot of personal attributes of mine. So yeah, curly fries.
I'm going to choose something different. I can't remember all the types of potato because there are about 400 of them. I'd probably go with a sweet potato fry. Look at me, pushing the boundaries. Because I am very sweet. I'm sometimes orange. No. I think I quite like sweet potato fries, and I also quite like me. So perhaps that is enough. I hope it's enough, because that's all you're getting.
Just before we go to the floor again, we've got another email question. Standing orders have been mentioned a lot this evening. What is your favourite section and clause, and why?
Favourite section, clause, and standing orders. Right. Let's have a little think. Okay, so whenever people are asked this question, they tend to bring up the certain college officers that are defined in the standing orders. And having read through all, I think, is it 83 pages currently? It's quite substantially long. I'd say that's certainly the most entertaining aspect of it, so I'm going to try and focus my answer there.
82.
82, oh. Maybe there was an extra page on mine, who knows the font. So my favourite college officer as defined in the standing orders would be the college murderer, which their role as described in standing orders is they are the most likely to commit a murder in college. They have personal attributes that seem to deem their use of this role that they are the most likely to actually kill someone. Which I think is very interesting. I'd love to know who the current college murderer is. I'd love to have a detailed chat with them. But yeah, I'd say that's probably my favourite section, simply because it's the only part that actually made me raise my eyebrows in intrigue and sheer confusion.
Yeah, they're really long, so it's quite hard to narrow down. I think there's just so much good stuff. I think probably my favourite section would, like Tom, be the college officers. I imagine that most people haven't got that far down the standing orders. I imagine it's quite easy to think that you'll read them and then after about page 1, think, you know what, that's enough for now. Because the college officers, they have all sorts of things. They have college toupee, which is named after some chap, I believe, from the 1990s who had a rather unfortunate case of alopecia. And so in the future, anyone else with alopecia in college will be crowned college toupee. And it'll be easy to crown them, because there won't be any hair in the way. Which is useful. So yes, college officers. I think in terms of standing orders banter, that's the real concentration. In terms of practical things, my answer would be different, but I think that, you know, of all the bits that I enjoy reading most and that I would encourage you to read, that is definitely the one.
I'm going to be so boring right now. My favourite part, for actually serious reasons, is section 3.1, and that's about the role of the JCR. And I think that actually summarises quite well what the role of the exec is itself, and that is to represent the sort of individual and collective views of the JCR fairly into the appropriate offices, to facilitate the educational, social, sporting, cultural and general needs of the JCR, and to provide services which allow you to do that, and to also administer your own finances. And I think for me that actually, while it's the role of the JCR, it sums up how the execs should be seen as servants to the JCR, and actually their role in terms of trying to facilitate this. And for me, it just sort of summarises why we're going for these roles, and actually the importance of what we do in terms of the running of the JCR.
A small push for the standing orders. The section you're looking for if you're looking to find out about college servants is section 17. Elizabeth.
What is your greatest strength that you could bring to the role, and what is your greatest weakness? Also, complement weaknesses like perfectionism and caring too much don't count.
Please outline your greatest strengths and biggest weaknesses.
Let's start with the weakness to end on a high. I think I have a tendency, perhaps, to occasionally, sometimes be slightly stubborn. And I think that part of the role of senior student is that, given that you are de facto leader of the exec, given that you are expected to have an opinion, given that you are supposed to represent the JCR, I think that there is the potential for being fairly sort of firm in your beliefs, and I think that if anything, that is what I would fall into. Ultimately, though, and I'm going to clarify that I don't think that would be that much of a problem, because ultimately the senior student is expected to get their opinions from the JCR, and so stubbornness to some extent is probably quite important, because, you know, bending over to whoever is sort of, you know, talking to you or trying to enforce anything isn't going to be that useful. I don't know why everyone's giggling. So yes, I think that is the one that I would have potential to fall into, but ultimately I think that having some element of stubbornness is important. In terms of my greatest strength, I'm not going to say that's more challenging, that sounds really cocky. I think that the ability I would personally say that I'm quite an approachable character. I don't think that, obviously I can be serious when I need to be. Hopefully I've shown that that isn't always the case during this Hust. And I think that sense of approachability is really, really important for the senior student, because ultimately if someone has a problem, then senior student is someone that they should be able to go to. And I think that my ability to be serious when necessary, but also have that sense of sort of just normal student being sort of, you know, occasionally funny, possibly, and just being seeming normal and not falling into that sense that, oh, I'm a senior student, I'm, you know, all high and mighty, being basically normal, and in that sense seeming approachable, I think would probably be my at least key strength.
Yeah, ooh, hard. Again, I think I'll start with a weakness, and I would say that would probably be for me trying to take on too much and actually not realising how much sort of effort goes into sort of things I say yes to. Be that sort of academic stuff, be that getting involved in socials, be that getting involved in sports side of things. I do love getting involved, and I think that's something which I'm going to have to tame over the next year, and that'll be one of the struggles which I probably will face. It's drawing the line between when I need to work, when I need to really crack down, and actually when I do need to let my hair down and socialise a bit more. So I think, yeah, that's probably going to be my key weakness, actually saying no to certain aspects. But that's something to develop, and that's something I'm very willing to do. In terms of strengths, I think my general ability to sort of just generally chat and generally get to know people, break down sort of divides which mean that people don't feel they can come towards me. Again, like Fraser said, just that whole sort of persona and approachability aspect of things. I'm more than willing to share a pint or just have a chat with anyone who comes up and talks to me. And I think that, in terms of building relationships, is absolutely key. In terms of how I've done that this year, in the role of Deputy Head of Security, which now no longer exists, and I'm completely benign, but that has allowed me to actually get to know members of College Office on a sort of personal level, and just, again, like Chris was saying, in terms of one of his main things about what he wants to do next year is actually seeing where College Office are coming from and getting to know them on a personal level, see which way they want to go. And I feel I've already started doing that, and through my persona, and actually the fact that I'm very laid back in my approach to dealing with people. And so having that as a strength, I think, is very important, especially when you're managing such a diverse group of people, that you are able to sort of manage yourself and just change how you are and how you are perceived in order to sort of best get along with people. I think that's, yeah, strength.
Alright, main strength and weakness. I might shake things up a bit. I might start with the strength on this one. So I'd probably say my greatest strength in approaching this role is the commitment to the role itself, and this takes a lot of forms. Firstly, I think we can all appreciate here, senior student is probably one of the most, if not the most complicated role in college. It's so multifaceted, so ridiculously complex in everything you have to do, the responsibilities you have, the people you have to talk to on a day-to-day basis. And I am 100% convinced that I would show full commitment to that, both through managing my time and how I would do it, and also through making sure that people's views were adequately got across, through that I was being firm when I needed to be, I would take the job seriously but not myself at times, commitment to other members of the exec, commitments to members of the JCR so that everyone feels valued and involved, and that I also dedicate as much of my time as possible to ensuring that this college continues to be run in a smooth and effective way. So commitment would be my main strength. My main weakness is slightly more airy-fairy because I think it's a weakness that every person approaching this role suffers to a degree. And that's this job, whoever gets it, the person who gets it is going to be faced with the problem that no day is the same. And you cannot predict which direction college is going to go, what problems you're going to have to address, how you can address them immediately. You cannot be dogmatic about this at all. So I say my main weakness is not knowing what tomorrow is going to bring. And that might sound slightly airy-fairy, but I think it's still a very important weakness to address because you do have this lack of knowledge and you learn every day. I'm sure Will would agree. This is a role where you are literally learning new things every day, however big or small. And it's adapting that knowledge and making sure that it all goes in that's very important. And it's starting from, well, not kind of starting from the bottom now we're here kind of attitude, but starting from the base, making sure that you can really get up there. I'd say starting is the weakness, but this is something that will be developed every single day, whoever gets into the role.
Well,
could you please perform a Kiwi-style hacker about what castle means to you?
could you please perform a hacker about what castle means to you?
Yeah. Should we play teamwork? Are we allowed to do that as a team? We should phrase it, and we've raised this. Separate, okay.
You've got to stand up.
Yeah, no, I've got to stand up. Jeez. What?
You can put the mic down, Bill.
Yeah, no. Oh, God.
I want to be a castle ranger. I want to be a castle ranger.
President, but genuinely because it is sweaty, I do want to take some of the stuff off. That was really big. Nice. Oh yeah, upping up the game slightly. Well, I realise I'm quite a small chap, so this is going to be very interesting. Right.
Nonno pistol, community, come on.
Thank you. I'll be here all evening.
I feel like having my shirt tucked in somewhat on this now. Fuck it. Oh dear. Prepare. Limber up, you know. Oh God. I sound like I'm in pain. That isn't what I'm aiming for. Approachability. I just sound.
Please excuse me if I decide to keep my jacket on. We're going to go to 2 questions now. We're going to have a serious one, then a fun one. So anyone with the final serious question? Chris.
So obviously this is one of the worst terms for some of So how would you keep your exec motivated at this stressful time in the year?
How would you keep your exec motivated during the stressful summative season of Epiphany term?
That's a very good question. Let me have a quick think about that. Motivation. Well, I suppose, firstly, the important thing is informality in a general sense. Making sure that the exec acts as a separate space, a bubble outside of the exam world, where we can say this is where we do not think about these issues of examinations, we can keep calm about it. That's not motivation, but it's an important base layer. Motivation in the proactive sense, I would say, firstly, being a warm and welcoming presence for the rest of the exec, making, on day-to-day things, just saying, how are you, making sure that everyone is okay, getting welfare involved where necessary, making sure that everyone keeps a high spirit in the summative season. Also, I'd probably encourage an exec social or two, I suppose. Ultimately, people need to relax. College can be extremely difficult at times, especially during summative season, and having something to look forward to often acts as a form of motivation for me, especially in evenings or at the end of the week. So I think promoting that sort of thing, that people feel they can work now, play later, is something that would keep people going in high spirits.
I think, being a motivational person is important. Ultimately, I think the exec will motivate each other quite a lot. It's important to remember that first term is widely regarded as the term to get things done, because second term is more busy, and it isn't fair to expect the exec to continue to work to quite the same level in their sort of exec capacities. Obviously, if someone is very busy, then it would be important to lessen the workload of their sort of exec job, which would hopefully help. If they're having welfare issues, direct them to, well, I suppose it would be Archie or Abby if they're willing to sort of explore that option. Ultimately, I think that it's important to remember that the exec ran for their position or applied for their position because they really do want to serve the JCR, and so I don't think motivation is that much of an issue, perhaps. I think it's more just a case of whether they have the time, and if they don't have time, then that's fine. Because their degrees do have to come first. If they're really letting things slip, then obviously that's a problem. But I don't think that it's wise for people's educations to suffer just because they're on the exec. And I think we do have to be quite sort of flexible in the amount of work that they do, particularly in summative season, because they need time to do their exec work, they need time to do their degrees, their dissertations, and they need time to relax at some point. And so just being aware, I think, would be my main aim, being aware of who has work, who has a lot of exec stuff to do, and making sure that there is no undue pressure imposed.
Okay, so I do disagree slightly with what Fraser said there, in that while we do need to get our degrees, and education is very important here, I don't think we should be letting the roles of the JCR exec slip. And I think it's the glorious thing about the senior student role is that you can get involved in pretty much any way you want to within the college. And I know one of the things which Will's been heavily involved in is helping Joe out with treasury stuff. And I think the important thing you've got to know is that if you're on top of your exec and you know what your exec have got on, then you can jump in where you feel that they've got too much workload, where they may be stressed, where they may be struggling, and actually saying, look, what can I do to help out? How can I make your workload lighter so actually you can still get the job done? I think in terms of how you go about this, I think the exec meeting on a weekly basis is very important, just to check up on the rest of your exec and say, look, how are you guys getting on? Is there anything else you need me to do? What have you got coming up in the next couple of weeks which may affect how you can do your job, and how can we address that now, early, and sort of plan for it? I think on the more personal side of things, actually, as well, just taking the members of the executive side aside, you become a community up there in itself, which you're living day in, day out next to each other, and you should be on that personal level where if you see someone stressed, you just say, look, let's take some time out, let's go for a drink, let's just get away from this, and actually, in some ways, put the exec work aside for an hour or two, and just do something else, and say, look, what do you want to do? Should we just go have a chat? Do you want to go have a meal? Let's go have a coffee. But actually having that personal thing and saying, if you've got issues, come to me because I'm going to help you deal with them. And we're still going to make sure that the exec and the JCR functions, but we're going to do it in a way which is actually causing us less stress and is just generally better for our welfare and stuff. And so just checking the welfare of your own exec officers and keeping on top of that, I think is really important.
Are there any more fun questions out there? We've had a few objections to the humorous levels on that question. Tom, have you got a better suggestion?
Can we have a shag, marry, avoid? I'd quite like a shag.
Shag, marry, avoid Tom, Harper, Fraser and Gus.
I should have stayed quiet.
Wait, Jack, can they talk about the candidates? Can they talk about the candidates?
We can't really do that question.
I think we can.
We're not allowed to talk about each other. So what we'll do is we'll do a shag, marry, avoid, Will, Tom,
yes.
Will Throp, Henry Winlow, Simon Gallo.
I would... Only two of them are in the room, so I imagine I'd avoid Simon Gallo. Lovely as he is. So I'm either shagging or marrying Throp or Henry. I'm not disappointed. I'm thoroughly pleased at the opportunity. I know Will marginally better, so I would probably, although he's just winked at me, so I'm shagging him. I'm definitely that's happening now. Which means I'm marrying Henry, which is he's a lucky duck, so that's nice. Lovely.
Well, Henry, you seem like the sort of guy who it would be lovely to come home after a stressful day and just sort of chill out, watch a musical, have a bit of a cuddle, have a bit of a cry actually sometimes. I feel you'd be really comforting with that, and I would marry you for those reasons. Partially for my own welfare, I just think you're lovely. Gallo or Throp? Shag or avoid? Something I've often thought about with Will actually. Shag or avoid, but I don't know. I would probably actually say I'd probably say in all ways he puts me to shame, so I'm going to avoid him. Dancing and other. I would probably then shag Gallo because I think he's a bundle of laughs and actually, yeah, he's just top bloke.
This is probably one of the funny questions I've actually genuinely dedicated time to thinking about, because I was thinking someone was going to pose, would you marry or shag Winlow or Throp? So I have given a lot of thought to this. And I have quite strong opinions. I would... It's something that I think is very important, very important. I would shag you, Will, at a heartbeat. I think you've got a dark side to yourself that often comes across when you're speaking, and I don't know if you knew you were doing it, but you're kind of doing this about a second ago when you were looking over at us. I don't know if you're trying to give some hidden messages there, but I picked up on them, so don't worry. So I'd shag Throp, because it would be amazing. I would marry you, Winlow, because you are a charmer, and the way that you talk to people sweeps them off their feet in any scenario. And I genuinely think that if we were married, you would find new ways to romance me every single week. And we would treat each other right. And I think that's very important for a marriage. On top of that, I would definitely avoid Gallo because I've heard a lot of inter-review rumours about him. About his, well, not in a bad way, but I've heard things that I certainly probably shouldn't have. So having the dirt on Gallows means that I know his dirty little secrets, and it does not make me want to marry or sleep with him, I'm afraid. Though he's a lovely guy, I'm just saying. So yeah, I would sweep Winlow off his 3 feet with sweet marriage. I would do the nasty with Will, and avoid gallows very much.
On that delightful note, can we have a huge round of applause for our three senior students?